The sound of splintering wood is not exactly what a man wants to hear before breakfast. Yet there it was again, my ranch gate groaning like an old soldier as Karen's shiny white SUV barreled straight through it like she owned the place. For her, my land wasn't property. It was a shortcut. She didn't wave. She didn't ask. She just blasted past with her sunglasses on like some queen of suburbia. The first time I thought it was a mistake. The second time I thought she was testing me. By the third I knew she was daring me. And let me tell you, I'm not the kind of man who takes kindly to being dared. Especially not on my own land. What Karen didn't know was that while she was busy playing HOA royalty, I was busy building a trap she'd never see coming. Before we dive in, drop a comment below with where you're watching from and what time it is there. When I bought the ranch, I pictured peace. Wide open skies, cattle grazing at dawn, and a wooden gate that swung closed with a satisfying thud every night. After 30 years of construction, jobs dust in my lungs, and HOA rules telling me what color my mailbox had to be, I wanted quiet. I wanted to breathe without some clipboard warrior knocking on my door about community standards. My ranch sat on the edge of Pine Hollow, a sprawling HOA-governed subdivision that had more rules than the state constitution. Luckily, my deed was outside their jurisdiction. I wasn't in their HOA, didn't pay their dues, and didn't have to answer to their president. The boundary line was marked by that gate of mine, a heavy cedar-framed arch I built with my own 2 hands lined with iron hinges swinging across the gravel drive. It was my line in the sand, and I was proud of it. I hadn't even been here a month before I met her. Karen. Perfectly coiffed blonde bob, oversized sunglasses, and a brand new SUV with a HOA-strong bumper sticker. She slowed down, rolled her window down halfway, and gave me a smile that didn't touch her eyes. "Lovely place," she said. "Thanks," I replied. Then, without another word, she pressed the gas and drove right through my closed gate. The hinges screamed, the cedar scraped across gravel, and before I could process what happened, she was halfway across my pasture, kicking up dust, like she was late to her own coronation. I stood there dumbfounded. My first thought was, maybe she was lost. Maybe GPS told her my ranch was a shortcut. But the boldness in her face, that dismissive half-smile as she waved in her rearview mirror, no. This wasn't a mistake. I spent the evening repairing the gate, muttering to myself. Reinforced the hinges, reset the posts, deeper in the soil. I chalked it up to bad manners and hoped it wouldn't happen again. Of course it did. A week later, same thing. I heard the rumble of her SUV turn just in time to see her nose over the hill, barreling straight at my gate. This time she didn't even slow down. She blasted through like she was storming Normandy. I ran out to the porch, waving my arms. "Hey, that's private property," I shouted. Her response, a laugh. She leaned out the window and shouted back community easement before disappearing down the drive. Community easement. My blood boiled. I knew my deed backward and forward. There was no easement, no shared road, no right-of-way. But she said it like a commandment from the Book of Karen. That night I went down to the local feed store for supplies, and wouldn't you know it, 2 old-timers there shook their heads when I mentioned her. "You got Karen driving through your land," one of them said, spitting sunflower seeds into a paper cup. "Afraid so," I replied. "Good luck with that. She runs the HOA like a little kingdom. Folks have been fighting her for years." The other chimed in. "She'll bleed you dry with fines and complaints if you ain't careful. Best to let her be." I didn't like that advice. Let her be. Let her tear down my gate every week like she owned it. Not on my land. Not in my lifetime. The third time it happened, I caught her in the act. I was stacking firewood by the barn when I heard the familiar crunch of gravel. I dropped the logs and marched out. There she was revving her SUV right in front of the gate. She saw me and smirked. "You really ought to keep this open," she said through her rolled-down window. "This is my gate," I shot back. "My property. You're trespassing." She raised her chin lips, curling like she tasted something sour. "Don't be so selfish. This road saves me 10 minutes every morning. It's community spirit." "Community spirit," I laughed, though nothing about it was funny. "Lady, this is trespassing. You're damaging my property." Her smirk hardened. "You're new here. Maybe you don't understand. The HOA sets the rules around here. You're not above them." That was the first time I heard the word HOA, like it was some divine right, like she wore a crown because she chaired a board of busybodies. I told her to turn around. She didn't. She drove through anyway, dust spraying my boots. I repaired the gate again, but it wasn't about cedar and hinges anymore. It was about principle. Every splinter felt like an insult. Every dent was her laughing in my face. The worst part, other board members started following her lead. A couple of times I saw a convoy of HOA vehicles cruising across my land like it was their new access road. They waved at each other, waved at me like I was just the groundskeeper. One afternoon I found an envelope tucked into my mailbox. Official HOA letterhead, a violation notice. My heart sank as I read it. Dear resident, you are in violation of HOA standards for maintaining unsightly structures. The ranch gate at the entrance of your property does not conform to community aesthetics. Please remove it immediately or face fines. I nearly laughed myself sick. I wasn't even in their HOA. My land was separate, deeded, and paid for outright. But there it was, black ink on white paper, an order to tear down the very gate they kept ramming through. I drove down to the town clerk's office to double-check the records. Sure enough, I was right. No easements, no HOA oversight. My gate was mine. Still, that letter felt like a warning shot. Karen wasn't just some entitled driver. She was starting a war. And if there's one thing you learn building houses for 30 years, it's that every structure, every wall, every roof, every gate is only as strong as the man willing to stand behind it. Karen thought she could scare me with paperwork and SUVs. But I'd built more than gates in my life. I'd built foundations, and I was about to build something that would end her shortcuts once and for all. By the end of that first month, I knew my little slice of peace had turned into a battleground. Karen wasn't just using my gate, she was flaunting it. The more I resisted, the bolder she became. It started small. She'd drive through once or twice a week, usually in the mornings. Her SUV tires chewed through my gravel dust clouds, drifting over my porch like a sandstorm, but then she got brazen. Afternoons, evenings, even late at night. I'd be out back feeding my horses and hear the low growl of her engine in the distance. Sure enough, headlights would pierce through the dark, my gate swinging open like some toll booth she refused to pay. One Sunday morning, I decided to block her path by parking my old Chevy pickup right inside the gate. I figured if she wanted her shortcut, she'd at least have to look me in the eye. I sat on the tailgate, sipping coffee, waiting. Didn't take long. Dust on the horizon, then the familiar shape of her SUV barreling down the road. She slowed when she saw me, then leaned out her window with that same smug grin. "You're wasting your time," she said. "This road is for everyone." "No, ma'am," I replied evenly. "This road is for me. The deed says so." Her sunglasses glinted. "You can't own land that blocks community access. It's against the law." I nearly choked on my coffee. Against the law, I'd checked the county records twice. She was bluffing, but she did it so confidently you'd think she'd written the law herself. "I suggest you turn around," I told her. Her smirk widened. "And I suggest you move your truck." We stared at each other for what felt like a full minute. Finally, she huffed, whipped her SUV into reverse, and screeched off in a cloud of gravel. For a moment, I thought I'd won. But the very next day, I came home from town to find my gate lying flat on the ground. Posts snapped, hinges twisted like paper clips. Fresh tire tracks ran across my pasture. Karen had escalated. And now it wasn't just her. That week, I spotted at least 2 other HOA members following her lead. A maroon minivan with a Pine Hollow HOA proud decal, and a silver sedan with the board treasurer's name on the license plate frame. They rolled across my property as if it had been deeded to them personally. It wasn't random, it was coordinated. Karen was turning my land into a shortcut for the whole HOA. I tried reason again, though, heaven knows why. One evening I walked over to the HOA office, a brick building that looked more like a law firm than a neighborhood association. Inside there, she was sitting at a polished desk stacked with binders. Karen looked up from her papers with a look of pure disdain, like I was some farmhand tracking mud on her marble floors. "We need to talk," I said firmly. "Oh, good," she replied sweetly. "You're here about your fines." "My what?" She slid a paper across the desk. It listed violations against me, unapproved structures, unkempt land failure to comply with HOA road easements. Each line came with a dollar amount beside it. Altogether, nearly $3,000. "You're out of your mind," I said. "I'm not even in your HOA." Her tone sharpened. "Don't play games. Every property here falls under our community charter." "That's a lie, and you know it," I snapped. The county clerk confirmed it. "I'm outside your boundary lines." Karen leaned back in her chair, tapping her manicured nails against the armrest. "Boundaries are flexible when community welfare is at stake." "Boundaries are legal," I shot back. "And mine aren't flexible." Her lips tightened. "You'll regret this stubbornness." That was the moment I realized we weren't just having a disagreement. This was a war of attrition. She'd find me, harass me, intimidate me, anything to break me down until I gave in. And she had allies. Later that week, I was fixing fence posts when one of her board members, a wiry man with a clipboard, marched up like he owned the place. "Sir, you can't keep rebuilding this gate," he announced. "HOA has voted. The road stays open." I wiped the sweat off my forehead. Funny I don't recall voting in your HOA. Because I'm not in it. He scribbled something on his clipboard. "Failure to comply will result in further penalties." I laughed, but there wasn't humor in it. "You'll need more than a clipboard to scare me, pal." He stomped off, muttering, "Karen will handle you." And handle me she did. One night, around midnight, I was jolted awake by the sound of splintering wood. I grabbed my flashlight and stormed out. There it was again, the gate demolished. And in the distance, Karen's SUV taillights shrinking into the night. This time she didn't even bother pretending. No words, no excuses, just pure defiance. I stood in the dark fists, clenched looking at the wreckage. The cedar planks I'd cut, the hinges I'd welded, all scattered like matchsticks. My ranch didn't feel like mine anymore. It felt invaded. The next morning, I overheard neighbors whispering at the general store. "She's been cutting through his land again. Won't end well." But nobody beats Karen. She's got the sheriff on speed dial, the county clerk in her pocket. That's when I knew I couldn't rely on law or reason. Karen wasn't going to stop because she believed she didn't have to. In her mind, the HOA was untouchable, and she was its queen. But me, I wasn't built to roll over. Years of construction had taught me that if a structure kept collapsing, you didn't patch it, you rebuilt it stronger. And sometimes you built it with steel, not wood. As I gathered the broken pieces of my gate, a thought began to take root. A dangerous thought. What if the next time Karen tried her little shortcut, she didn't just break wood? What if instead she ran straight into something she couldn't laugh off? That night I sat on my porch staring at the stars, turning it over in my head. Karen thought she was playing a game of fines and notices, but I was done playing. I was going to set a trap, and when she hit it, she'd never forget it. By now, every time I heard the low growl of an SUV engine, my pulse spiked. Karen had gotten under my skin in a way few people ever had. It wasn't just about a gate anymore. It was about ownership, respect, and whether a man's land was truly his own when someone else decided they had a right to it. The morning after she smashed the gate again, I found another envelope in my mailbox. This one wasn't even subtle. Notice of violation: ranch entrance obstructs community traffic. Remove gate within 7 days or face daily fines of $250. I stood there on the porch letter, trembling in my hand. I wasn't even in their HOA. Yet somehow they thought slapping fake fines on me would break me. That same afternoon, Karen herself marched up to my porch, clipboard in hand heels, clicking on my wooden steps like she was walking into a courtroom she already owned. "You've been warned," she declared, waving the paper. "Take down that gate or the HOA will escalate legal action." I leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. "Karen, this isn't your land. This isn't your road. You don't get to make rules here." Her face flushed. "I am the president of Pine Hollow HOA, and every road within this community." I cut her off. "This isn't within your community. My deed proves it." For a second, I saw her falter. But Karen wasn't the type to admit defeat. She straightened her blazer and jabbed the paper toward my chest. "You're a selfish man," she hissed. "You're denying your neighbors access. This road is a public benefit." I couldn't help but laugh. "You mean it's a shortcut for your morning coffee runs? Don't dress it up as some noble cause." Her eyes narrowed, venomous. "You'll regret this." Then she turned on her heel and stormed off. The next week was a circus. HOA board members began inspections of my ranch. Men with clipboards showed up, uninvited, peering over my fence like vultures. They snapped photos of my barn, my livestock, even the hay bales stacked out back. I confronted one of them, a wiry fellow with sunken eyes and a smirk, and he had the audacity to say, "Documenting violations." Violations of what I demanded. Community standards. I barked out a laugh. "This isn't your community." He didn't even answer, just scribbled something down and left. That night, as I sat on my porch, I heard tires crunching over gravel again. Karen's SUV headlights cut through the dark. She didn't slow down at the gate, she rammed through what little repair I'd managed. My dogs barked, my horses, spooked. She floored it across my land, then disappeared into the night. Something inside me shifted. That was the moment irritation hardened into resolve. The breaking point came 3 nights later. It was close to midnight when I heard the screech of tires and the crash of wood splitting. I stormed outside, shotgun slung over my shoulder, more for show than for use. By the time I got to the drive, my gate was once again in pieces, only this time Karen wasn't alone. 3 cars had plowed through. Hers in the lead, 2 HOA board members behind. They hooted like teenagers, sneaking into a fairground, headlights bouncing across my pasture. I shouted until my voice cracked, but they didn't stop. They were making a point my land was theirs now. The next morning I went into town to complain at the sheriff's office. The deputy listened, chewing on a toothpick, then shook his head. "Without video proof, it's your word against theirs," he said. "And you know Karen's got influence. She'll spin it as you blocking a community road." So that was that. No help from the law. I drove home fuming, gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles ached. If the law wouldn't protect me, I'd protect myself. The following evening, as I hammered the last hinge onto a makeshift replacement gate, Karen showed up again. This time, she didn't bother with pleasantries. "You're wasting your time," she said, stepping out of her SUV. "We'll keep driving through until that gate is gone. Accept it." I straightened up, sweat dripping down my back. "You think you own me? Think again. This is my land and I'll defend it." Her smile was cold, practiced. "We'll see. The board is meeting tomorrow. We're voting to remove your gate permanently, with or without your consent." I stared at her for a long moment, then leaned forward just enough to let her know I meant every word. "You may have your board, Karen, but I've got something better, a backbone, and a plan." Her eyes flickered with something, maybe doubt, maybe curiosity, before she slipped back into her SUV and drove off. That night, sitting at my kitchen table, I sketched ideas on scrap paper. Wood wasn't working, hinges weren't working. If I wanted Karen to stop, I needed something she couldn't muscle through with horsepower and arrogance. Something that bit back. Steel, reinforcement, hidden defenses. The more I thought, the clearer it became. This wasn't about a gate anymore. It was about a trap. A structure that wouldn't just stop her, it would humiliate her. I chuckled to myself, the sound low and dangerous. For weeks, Karen had been treating my land like her personal speedway, but soon enough she'd learned that some gates don't just swing open, some gates bite. By the time I blew out the lantern and headed to bed, my mind was set. The power struggle was over. I was done reacting, done repairing. The next move would be mine. And when Karen came barreling through again, she'd discovered just how bad it feels to underestimate a man who's had enough. I woke up before dawn the next day with a clarity I hadn't felt in weeks. Enough was enough. Karen and her little HOA posse thought they had me cornered, but they'd forgotten one simple fact. I wasn't a man who gave up. I was a builder. I'd spent 3 decades on job sites, raising homes from nothing, fixing beams that had rotted through, pouring foundations that outlasted storms. If I could build a house to withstand a hurricane, I sure as hell could build a gate to withstand Karen. But this wouldn't just be a gate, this would be a trap. I started with the basic steel. Not the flimsy aluminum junk you'd find at Home Depot, but industrial-grade beams I'd salvaged years ago from a demolition job. They'd been sitting behind my barn gathering dust, but now they gleamed with purpose. Next came the posts. Instead of cedar, I drilled down and sank 6-foot steel posts into concrete footings reinforced with rebar cages. Each post could withstand thousands of pounds of force. I made sure of it. I welded crossbars, angled supports, and hidden reinforcements that turned the frame into something closer to a fortress gate than a ranch entrance. Then I layered the front with thick cedar planks so from a distance it still looked like my old humble wooden gate. But behind that rustic disguise was a wall of steel. And I wasn't done. See, stopping Karen's SUV wasn't enough. I wanted to end the shortcut once and for all. So I got creative. I dug shallow trenches just beyond the gate and filled them with tire-popping surprises, hardened steel spikes set into concrete troughs camouflaged beneath gravel. If someone tried to ram through again, the gate would hold them, and the spikes would shred their tires like paper. It was a design born of frustration but refined with precision, every measurement exact, every weld perfect. I worked through the night's lantern light, flickering against steel sweat running down my back. My dogs lay nearby, heads resting on their paws, watching as if they knew their master was preparing for battle. Neighbors passed by on the main road, curious. 1 or 2 stopped to chat. "You fixing that gate again?" one asked. "Not fixing," I said with a grin. "Upgrading." They raised their eyebrows, but no one pressed further. Around here, you learn not to meddle in another man's feud. Of course, word got back to Karen. 3 days into my project, I caught her SUV parked just beyond the property line, engine idling. She watched me through tinted windows, cell phone in hand, likely recording. I kept working, hammer ringing against steel, ignoring her glare. Finally, she rolled down her window. "You really think you can stop progress?" she sneered. I didn't even look up. "No, but I can stop you." Her laugh was sharp, brittle. "We'll see. The board meets tomorrow. We're filing an injunction." "Good luck," I muttered, sparks flying as I welded another seam. She drove off tires, spitting gravel in protest. That night, my buddy Hank stopped by. Old rancher face weathered like leather hands, calloused from decades of fence mending. He leaned against the post watching me work. "You're playing with fire, you know that," he said. "I know. She's got the sheriff on speed dial. She'll scream harassment the second this backfires. Then I'll make sure it doesn't backfire." He studied me for a long moment, then chuckled. "Hell, I like your style. Need an extra pair of hands." Together, we finished the last reinforcements, tightening bolts, testing welds, checking alignments. When we finally stepped back, sweat-soaked and exhausted, the gate stood proud, deceptively simple on the outside, indestructible within. "Looks just like the old one," Hank said, "but it ain't, is it?" I shook my head, not even close. By the 5th day, the trap was complete. The gate swung smoothly on reinforced hinges, locking into steel brackets set deep into the concrete. The trenches were covered seamlessly with gravel, the spikes invisible unless you knew where to look. Even the posts were painted to match the old cedar, blending in perfectly with the ranch aesthetic. To the untrained eye, it looked like the same flimsy barrier Karen had smashed a dozen times. But to me, it looked like justice. That evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the sky in gold and crimson, I sat on my porch staring at the finished product. My hands were blistered, my back ached, but my heart was steady. For weeks, Karen had treated me like a pushover, some lonely rancher she could bully. She thought fines, threats, and SUVs made her untouchable. But she'd forgotten the oldest rule in the book: every bully eventually meets a wall they can't knock down. And tomorrow, when she came roaring through again, she'd find out just how hard that wall could hit back. I leaned back in my chair, dogs at my feet, and whispered to the quiet evening air, "Come on, Karen, I'm ready." The trap was set. All I had to do now was wait. And if there was one thing I'd learned about Karen, it was that patience wasn't one of her virtues. She couldn't resist proving herself. She had to win, had to show dominance. Sooner or later, she'd come barreling through my land again. It didn't take long. On a bright Saturday afternoon, the sound came. The low, throaty growl of her SUV rolling down the road, louder and louder, until the gravel trembled beneath her tires. I set down my coffee cup on the porch rail, leaned back in my chair, and watched. There she was. Perfect hair, oversized sunglasses, jaw set with that smug determination I'd come to know too well. Behind her followed 2 other vehicles, the HOA treasurer's maroon minivan and another board member's sedan, a convoy of arrogance. Karen didn't slow down, not one bit. She revved harder, speeding up as though the very act of smashing through my gate gave her power. I held my breath as her SUV closed the distance. Then it happened. The moment her bumper hit the gate, refused to budge. Instead of splintering like before, it stood unshaken, anchored into its steel core. The sound was like a gunshot metal against metal, the echo of finality. Her SUV jolted violently. The front end crumpled with a sickening crunch. Airbags exploded, white smoke puffing out of the windows. Tires shrieked against gravel as momentum carried her forward another foot before the reinforced steel held her like a fly caught in amber. And then came the spikes. As her rear tires skidded over the disguised trench, the steel teeth bit deep, ripping rubber apart with a sound that made me wince even from the porch. Pop, pop, pop. Within seconds, her SUV sagged forward on shredded wheels, hissing like a wounded animal. The convoy behind her screeched to a halt, too late to save her. The minivan swerved into the ditch, fishtailing before stalling out. The sedan braked hard, horn blaring, narrowly avoiding piling into her bumper. Dust settled over the scene, hanging in the summer air like smoke after a battlefield skirmish. For a long moment, everything was silent. Then the screaming began. Karen flung open her door, stumbling out in a cloud of airbag dust. She coughed, eyes wide, face twisted with fury. "What have you done?" she shrieked, pointing at me as though I'd just committed a crime against humanity. I stayed seated on the porch, calm as a preacher on Sunday morning. My dogs barked at her, but stayed at my side, tails stiff with tension. "What I've done," I called back, "is stop you from trespassing." Her voice cracked into a shrill pitch. "This is illegal. You've put lives at risk." I stood slowly, walked down the steps, and approached the wreck. The closer I got, the clearer the picture. Her SUV's bumper bent like a crushed soda can, airbags drooping, fluids dripping onto the gravel. It was a mess. But me, I smiled. "You were warned," I said evenly. "Over and over. You chose this." She stomped her heel into the ground, trembling with rage. "You're finished. The HOA will bury you in lawsuits." I raised an eyebrow. "On what grounds? You drove through a private gate on private property without permission. That's trespassing." And lucky for me, I tapped my pocket, pulling out a small device. I installed cameras this time. I pointed to the posts. Sure enough, small security cams were mounted discreetly at angles, flashing red recording lights. Her face went pale beneath the dust and makeup. "You wouldn't," she whispered. "I would," I replied. By now, neighbors had gathered along the main road drawn by the noise. Phones were out recording every second. A few chuckles rippled through the crowd as they saw Karen standing in front of her immobilized SUV, red-faced and sputtering. "Looks like the Queen's lost her crown," one man muttered loud enough for everyone to hear. Laughter followed. The HOA treasurer crawled out of the minivan, limping slightly, his clipboard still clutched in his hand like a shield. He tried to speak, but the crowd drowned him out with jeers. The sedan driver didn't even get out, just sat there, face buried in his palms. Karen spun around, glaring at the neighbors. "Stop laughing, this is a serious violation." But the more she screamed, the more people laughed. The sight of Pine Hollow's self-proclaimed ruler, stranded, humiliated, and powerless, was too much for them to resist. And me, I just stood there, arms crossed, soaking it all in. The sheriff eventually arrived, lights flashing. He stepped out, surveying the scene with raised eyebrows. "What in the blazes happened here?" he asked. Karen ran to him like a child to a parent. "He set a trap. He sabotaged the road. He could have killed us." The sheriff turned to me. "That true?" I shook my head. "This isn't a public road. It's my private property. She's been trespassing for weeks. I reinforced my gate and installed cameras. You'll find everything you need on the footage." Karen's yaw dropped. "You can't." "Ma'am," the sheriff interrupted, voice sharp, "you've been warned before about pushing boundaries. If these cameras show what he says they do, you're the one in trouble." The crowd cheered, phones held high. Karen's face went crimson, eyes darting from me to the sheriff to the neighbors, recording her downfall. For once, she was speechless. I walked up to her, SUV tapped the hood, and said loud enough for everyone to hear, "Shortcuts closed, Karen." The crowd erupted in laughter whistles, echoing down the road. Karen covered her face, screaming muffled curses before retreating back into her ruined SUV. The sheriff shook his head. "We'll be in touch, but from the looks of it, you're in the clear." I nodded, watching as the tow trucks arrived, to drag away her convoy of shame. And as the dust settled once more over Pine Hollow, I felt something I hadn't in weeks. Peace. Because Karen had finally learned the hard way that not every gate can be broken. Some gates fight back. If there's one thing I learned from all this, it's that Karen never admitted defeat. Even with her SUV, crumpled her tires, shredded, and half the neighborhood laughing at her expense, she wasn't finished. No humiliation just made her more dangerous. The very next morning, I woke up to find another envelope in my mailbox. This one was thicker, heavier. Inside was a stack of papers stamped with official-looking seals. At the top, notice of legal action. According to the document, the HOA was suing me for reckless endangerment, property damage, and willful obstruction of community easement. They demanded I not only remove my gate permanently, but also pay for the emotional distress suffered by Karen and her fellow board members. The cherry on top, they wanted me to cover the repair costs of her SUV. I laughed so hard I nearly spilled my coffee. Still, the audacity of it made my blood boil. Here I was the victim of months of trespassing and vandalism, and somehow I was the one being painted as a criminal. I didn't waste time. I drove straight into town to see an attorney, a sharp-eyed woman named Martha, who'd been practicing property law longer than Karen had been harassing people. She leafed through the papers, shook her head, and smirked. "Classic HOA overreach," she said. "They don't have jurisdiction over your land, and they know it. But they're banking on you, folding under pressure." "Well, folding isn't in my vocabulary," I replied. She chuckled. "Good. Because this is going to be fun." Martha filed a countersuit within the week, trespassing, destruction of private property, harassment, and attempted fraud through false fines. And thanks to my cameras, we had everything on tape: Karen smashing through the gate, HOA members tailgating her, and the aftermath of their little joyride. When Karen realized I wasn't backing down, she doubled down. 2 days later, I came home to find a group of board members standing outside my gate with clipboards, shouting loud enough for the whole street to hear. "This man is dangerous," one cried. "He set a trap that could have killed children. Unsafe structures violations everywhere," another added. Karen herself stood in the center, waving papers like a general rallying her troops. "We cannot allow one stubborn man to endanger our community. He will pay for what he's done." Neighbors gathered, but unlike before, the crowd didn't side with her. They murmured among themselves, some shaking their heads, others recording on their phones. The tide was turning. I stepped onto my porch, arms crossed, and raised my voice. "You all want the truth. Watch the footage. Every single time she plowed through that gate, every fake fine, every trespass, it's all on camera." Then I pointed to the crowd. "You've all seen it with your own eyes. This isn't about safety. This is about control. Murmurs turned into shouts. Someone yelled, "We're tired of the HOA bullying us." Another chimed in, "You tell him, neighbor." Karen's face paled beneath her makeup, but she held her ground, shrieking, "Lies, all lies." But the damage was done. The cracks in her kingdom were showing. The court hearing was where it all truly unraveled. Karen arrived in a bright red suit, armed with a stack of binders, her board members trailing behind her like nervous ducklings. She strutted into the courtroom as if she owned it, smiling to the spectators like a politician at a campaign rally. When the judge called the case, Karen's lawyer launched into a dramatic speech about how I'd endangered the welfare of the community with my booby-trapped gate. They painted me as some unhinged recluse obsessed with defending imaginary property rights. Then Martha stood, calm, precise, deadly. "Your Honor," she began, "the evidence will show that my client's property lies outside of HOA jurisdiction. These fines and claims are fraudulent. And as for endangerment, the only danger here was caused by the reckless trespassing of the HOA president and her associates." She clicked a remote and the courtroom screens lit up. Video footage rolled Karen's SUV slamming into the gate, tires bursting on the spikes, neighbors laughing in the background. Then the earlier clips played every time she rammed through every arrogant smirk, every shouted, "Community easement." By the end, the courtroom was buzzing. Even the judge raised an eyebrow, unimpressed with Karen's antics. When Karen herself was called to testify, she melted down. "I am the president," she screamed at one point, pointing at me. "He can't defy me. He can't defy the HOA." The judge slammed his gavel. "This is a court of law, not your board meeting. Sit down." Her credibility was shredded in seconds. The ruling came swift and sharp. The court dismissed the HOA's claims entirely. Instead, the judge ordered the HOA to pay damages for trespassing and property destruction. Karen herself was fined for harassment and reckless driving. And as the cherry on top, the footage was admitted into the public record, meaning it could be requested and leaked, which it was. Within a week, clips of Karen's SUV slamming into my gate went viral on social media. The internet had a field day. Memes sprouted up overnight, HOA Karen versus the Gate of Justice. One clip even got edited with dramatic music freezing on her shocked face as the caption read, "You shall not pass." The humiliation was complete. Back in Pine Hollow, the fallout was brutal. Neighbors who had long been silent finally spoke up. Stories of Karen's bullying poured out bogus fines, threats, intimidation tactics. Board members resigned one by one, unwilling to sink with her ship. By the month's end, the HOA's reputation was in shambles, its funds drained by legal fees and Karen. Karen was left isolated, her power gone, her influence shattered. And me, I sat on my porch one evening watching the sun sink behind my newly indestructible gate, sipping coffee with the sweet taste of victory. The war wasn't just won, it was exposed. After the dust of the courtroom settled, Pine Hollow felt like a different world. For the first time since I'd moved in, my mornings were quiet. No rumble of Karen's SUV. No convoy of HOA board members treating my ranch like their personal freeway. Just the wind in the grass, the soft nicker of horses, and the creak of my porch chair as I sipped my coffee. It felt like peace, the kind of peace I dreamed of when I bought this land. But as sweet as the silence was, I knew better. With people like Karen, silence wasn't surrender, it was regrouping. So I stayed vigilant. Weeks passed, though, and the most I saw of her was a blur of blonde hair as she slunk into her house, avoiding the neighbors' eyes. Word was spreading fast. Folks in Pine Hollow whispered about her fall from grace. The once untouchable HOA president had been reduced to a cautionary tale, her name muttered with equal parts scorn and amusement. I thought maybe, just maybe, she'd finally learned her lesson. Then one afternoon, a certified letter arrived. It was from Karen. She was offering a settlement if I agreed to take down my menacing gate and allow limited community passage. She'd drop any remaining complaints. She even dressed it up in polite language, all about moving forward and healing divisions. I laughed out loud. Healing divisions. After everything, she wasn't trying to heal anything. She was trying to claw back control. So I wrote her a response. A single page, 2 sentences. There is no community easement. I own the road. And I have the deed to prove it. See, here's the twist. All this time, while Karen was filing bogus fines and screaming about community rights, I'd quietly gone back through county records. And not only did I confirm my ranch stood outside HOA jurisdiction, I discovered something else. The road she loved so much, the shortcut she claimed as community property, it wasn't even listed as public. It was mine. Deeded to me, paid for in full. Karen and her board had been trespassing on my private road. Every dollar she spent on lawsuits, every ounce of energy she wasted trying to dominate me, it all crumbled with a single document. I'd been holding on to that knowledge like a loaded gun, waiting for the right time to reveal it. And now the time had come. When Karen received my response, the meltdown was immediate. She stormed onto my property one last time, waving the letter like a flag. "This is fraud," she screamed, her voice echoing across the fields. "You can't own that road. It's for the community." I walked calmly to the edge of my porch, folded arms resting on the railing. "Check the records, Karen. County clerk's office. Deeds in my name. Always has been." Her face twisted, eyes wide with disbelief. She sputtered like a car with no gas. That's impossible." "No," I said. "What's impossible is you ever setting foot on this road again. Consider yourself trespassed." Neighbors had gathered again, phones in hand, recording every word. And when Karen realized she was outnumbered, outrecorded, and out of power, something in her broke. She let out a strangled scream, stomped her heel into the dirt, then spun around and stormed off for the last time. From that day forward, Karen never drove through my gate again. The HOA, stripped of its tyrant leader, limped along quietly, its remaining members more interested in trimming hedges than bullying ranchers. And me. My ranch finally became the sanctuary I'd imagined. The gate stood tall, stronger than ever, guarding not just my land but my dignity. Every time I walked past it, I smiled. Not just because I'd won, but because I'd done it the right way. I hadn't stooped to Karen's level of intimidation and lies. I'd built something unbreakable, stood my ground, and let the truth do the rest. Sometimes justice doesn't arrive in the form of sheriffs or judges. Sometimes it comes in the shape of a gate that refuses to fall, no matter how many times. Arrogance tries to break it down. And for me, that was the sweetest victory of all. Looking back now, I realize this story wasn't just about a gate, or an SUV, or even a woman named Karen. It was about boundaries and the courage it takes to defend them. Life will always have people like Karen. Folks who think rules don't apply to them, who try to push past your lines, laugh at your warnings, and act like your no means nothing. They'll test your patience. They'll push and push until you either break or you build something stronger. I chose to build. And that's the lesson I want to leave with you. In life, your gate might not be made of wood and steel. It might be your time, your energy, your dignity, or your peace of mind. But whatever it is, don't let anyone trample through it just because they think they can. Set your boundaries, reinforce them, and when someone refuses to respect them, don't back down, because at the end of the day, respect isn't given, it's earned, and sometimes you have to demand it. So, I'll ask you this, what's the gate in your life that you need to protect? Drop your answer in the comments. And if you enjoyed this story, hit that subscribe button, because trust me, there are plenty more HOA battles, Karen dramas, and tales of sweet, sweet revenge coming your way.